Tonight's episode, The Case of the Missing Corpse, Part 3. After getting information from his army contact, Private Eye Mike McCabe was walking back to his car with more questions on his mind. I thanked James for the info and headed for my car. My brain was on fire. Evelyn could have known Ferris in Europe. Maybe Ferris was just helping her keep a promise to a dead man. But why was he calling himself a scapegoat? And what would someone want with Marino's body? Then it hit me. Unfortunately, someone else did too. The streetlights blinked twice before I blacked out. When I woke, I was face down on a concrete floor. I felt like someone had taken a hammer and used my head as a nail. I was blindfolded, and my hands were tied behind my back. I managed to pull myself up before someone punched me in the gut, sending me back to the floor. A gun muzzle was pressed against my forehead, and the pungent, rough stench of cigarette smoke filled my nose. It was a familiar scent, but I couldn't place it. "I'd like to complain to the concierge." My new friend punched me hard. If I could have seen stars, I would have seen a whole galaxy. "Now, you get no tip."
"Where is it?"
"You're the third person to ask me that tonight."
"Then you should know the answer pretty well."
Another punch to the face made me wonder if my head was still attached. When I spit the blood from my mouth, I hoped it landed on his shoe. "What's in it?"
"What do you mean?"
"Charles Ferris worked on shipping soldiers back home, including the dearly departed Marino. Someone pulled strings to get Ferris shipped home with the body. So, what was smuggled in the body?"
"You're pretty smart, detective."
"Yeah. My mother's very proud." A kick to my ribs took the air out of me.
"Why don't you just tell me where the body is, and we can call it a night?"
"I hate to put the fuzz on your lollipop, but I don't know where it is."
"It would be a shame for some harm to come to Mrs. Fleming. I suggest you find the body before it's too late."
The rope tying my hands was cut. I tore the blindfold off but couldn't move fast enough. The ape was gone. The room was dark, the only light coming in from the open door. I struggled to stand only to hit the floor one more time. I took a few breaths and tried again. It was hard to walk, but I managed to make it through the door. I was inside a lobby, the kind that theaters have, only this one hadn't been used for some time. Once outside, I saw the sign for the 44th Street Theater, due for demolition. I was in Manhattan, which meant I was in Evelyn Fleming's part of town. I caught a cab back to Canarsie, where my car was still parked in front of Rawlings' bungalow. His lights were out. At least someone was getting some sleep. I got a couple of gallons of gas at a station in Queens, then called Vera. She was as pleased to hear from me as ever.
"You ever think that maybe they call it office hours for a reason?"
Think of these as extended hours.
"Think of me quitting.
I'd rather not.
An extra $10 a month would be a great incentive not to."
Do I have a choice? Consider yourself a little richer.
Thank you, Mike. Now, before he enlisted, Angelo Marino was a bootlegger back in the day for Louis Halleman. He was arrested several times for grand larceny, assault, and murder. Never convicted, had no family, a lot of enemies, especially Hallerman, who, word on the street is, Marino stole a substantial amount from before he shipped off. He was at the liberation of Dachau concentration camp, killed shortly after. That's all I got.
Bootlegger, huh? I asked Vera to wait an hour and then make a call for me. Thanks, Vera.
Mike,
Yeah?
be careful.
Sure. A bootlegger would know the ins and outs of smuggling, and I had an idea of what he was smuggling. All I needed to know was who killed him for it. The Fleming residence was not what one would call modest. The two-story mansion stood on a hill looking down on the street below. If houses had faces, this one looked like it was ready to swallow any visitors. Whatever sins were committed here, the rain wouldn't be washing them away. The entrance gate opened on my approach, and the long driveway eventually led me to the front door. I parked in front and made my way up the stairs. The front door opened. Evelyn Fleming stood inside the doorway, a drink in one hand and an unlit cigarette in the other. Butler's night off?
You were supposed to phone.
I make house calls now, part of the service. I brushed past her into the foyer. A grand staircase rose up to the second floor where a huge painting of Mr. and Mrs. Fleming hung on the wall. It gave me the creeps. Where's your husband, Mrs. Fleming?
Sleeping. Come with me to the parlor.
The parlor was bigger than my whole apartment. A baby grand stood by a giant picture window overlooking the driveway. I touched the keys. Your piano's out of tune.
Showing up here is hardly the definition of discreet.
Charles Ferris.
Is that supposed to mean something?
He identified the body of your friend the night he was brought in.
Sounds like a friend of Angelo's.
Why didn't you identify Marino's body?
That would have attracted too much attention.
And making funeral arrangements wouldn't?
Some things can be handled anonymously.
Did you meet Ferris after one of your USO shows? Maybe he bought you a drink or took you on a hayride.
Is that what he said?
He didn't say much of anything, Mrs. Fleming, before he tried to kill me.
I don't understand.
Did you know that in the concentration camps the Nazis took all the valuables from the prisoners? Gold, jewelry, diamonds. I think Marino was murdered by Ferris, who was smuggling those diamonds back to New York in your friend's body. When the body was stolen, he must have figured he was being double-crossed.
Why Marino?
Your friend liberated one of those camps. He just couldn't pass up an opportunity to get rich. He wasn't exactly a saint, Mrs. Fleming. As a matter of fact, if he hadn't been killed overseas, a certain crime boss was probably waiting to put a bullet in him.
I'm calling the police.
I don't think so, my dear.
Arthur Fleming. Gray hair perfectly in place, mustache neatly trimmed, dressed impeccably in a tuxedo. His fingers were in shipbuilding, tire manufacturing, aluminum refineries, and were currently wrapped around the trigger of a very big hunting rifle. I guess I interrupted your plans for this evening.
I'm sure we can make things right again.
Arthur, what are you doing?
I'm afraid, Evelyn, that your curiosity has gotten the better of you.
How did you know?
I always keep an eye on you, my love. Don't you think I had you investigated before we married? Your old friend proved very useful to me.
Fleming opened the drawer of the credenza next to him and pulled out a small bag and shook it. The diamonds. Well, Mrs. Fleming, it seems that your husband has his own plans for protecting his reputation.
Move over there, by the piano. Both of you.
Arthur, please don't do this.
Killing both of us is the only way he gets away scot-free.
It was not my plan to kill either of you. If you had both left things as they were, no one would have been the wiser.
That's a single-shot Browning you're holding. If you miss, you'll never have a chance to reload.
Don't worry, Mr. McCabe. I don't miss.
Neither do I.
Arthur!
Hello, Evelyn.
Angelo? But you're dead.
And I'm gonna stay that way.
There was that smell again. Where did I know it from? I'm surprised Fleming worked with such a lowlife such as yourself.
The man had a plan, and I came highly recommended.
He picked up the bag and brought it to his lips. You had us all fooled. You murdered the real Ferris and forged his ID with your picture. I assume he found out about your plan and you killed him before he could report you.
Keep talking, smart guy.
You faked your death so your mob boss couldn't get his revenge for stealing from him. With a new identity and your share of the diamonds, you could set yourself up anywhere you wanted.
Keep going.
But when Fleming stole the body to cut you out, you were desperate to get even. You kidnapped me and slapped me around to push me into finding the body.
I didn't slap you around.
Marino tossed the bag to the familiar face that just entered the room.
I'm afraid it was me.
Now I remembered that smell. My old friend, Captain James Rawlings. Of course. Makorka tobacco, Russian cigarettes. You preferred smoking them to the American brands.
One of my vices.
You had the authority to cover up the murder and get Marino and Ferris's body on an early transport home.
It wasn't too difficult, especially with Fleming's connections.
How'd you figure he took the body?
The fence. He owed me a favor when he told me Fleming was ready to bring the diamonds in.
I guess friendship goes a long way. Except for us.
I wish it didn't have to be this way, Mike.
I took a step forward.
I wouldn't.
The call I asked Vera to make was to Manhattan's 19th Precinct. That would be Sergeant Robert Delaney, one of New York's finest. You were saying, Angelo?
Drop it and put your hands up.
Angelo dropped the gun and put up his hands. Rawlings did likewise. Just barely in the nick of time, Delaney. Did you stop for an all-night buffet?
Maybe next time I won't answer the phone when your secretary calls.
Delaney took the diamonds from Rawlings and handed it to one of the officers.
Bag it.
As Rawlings and Marino were led away, Rawlings placed a hand on my shoulder.
I'm sorry, Mike.
You almost sound sincere, James.
Officer, get him out of here.
Let's go.
I can't believe my husband was involved in something like this.
I guess your husband's reputation wasn't what you thought it was. For what it's worth, I'm sorry.
Mrs. Fleming, I'm going to need you to come with us.
Of course.
You too, Mike.
My jaw aches, my head is throbbing. I need a drink and about 18 hours of sleep. I'll see you in the morning, Delaney.
Have it your way.
On the drive home, I realized I had missed the second Yankees game, and my car needed gas again. I was too tired to make it home, so I went back to the office. I poured myself a drink from a bottle I kept in the file cabinet. The couch against the back wall was calling my name when the phone rang. The office was closed. I was in no condition to offer any help to anyone. It was late. I wasn't going to answer it. Oh, hell. McCabe Detective Agency, how can I help you?